been talking to my Conan players, and we're about to move the campaign from where it has been, which is in Karaja and Shem, and we're going to move it over to the country of Argos, which is the other end of Shem, and we're going to go back to Actaeon's hometown. I'm going to try running that as a sandbox, which I haven't done before. I might do a couple of videos on sandboxes, or at least on how I'm trying to implement it. It's not something I've done before, so I'm quite interested in the process, and I'm also interested in seeing which mistakes I make. Anyway, it's going to take me more than a fortnight to come up with the sandbox. So we were chatting the other day about what we were going to play, and a couple of people said I kept banging on about Hollow Earth Expedition, which shouldn't come as a great surprise to anybody who's been watching this channel. So I thought about it, and when I thought what I'd do is I'm going to run a Hollow Earth Expedition game using the Old West supplements that I've got. So that should be quite good fun. So we're going to set it in Arizona, and I'm going to run a pre-written scenario called the Ivory Trail, which I've started before but never finished. I tried running it for my kids, and the younger ones got a bit bored, and we just never came back to it. So I need to come up with some pre-gens because they're unlikely to all go and get the books and come up with the characters themselves, and we need them fairly fast. So I chatted to one of the players, and Simon said he quite fancied playing a character based on Jonah Hex. Not somebody I've come across before, but I took a look at it, and he's a surly and cynical bounty hunter whose face is horribly scarred on the right side, and despite his poor reputation and his personality, he is bound by a personal code of honour to protect and avenge the innocent. That sounded to me like an ideal character for a Hollow Earth Expedition game. So I thought, well, all right, rather than just come up with that on my own, why not put together a video that covers coming up with that character, with that pre-gen. So character generation in Hex is pretty simple. Basically, you choose an archetype. In this case, that's going to be bounty hunter. You choose a motivation. Now, Jonah's motivation, we've already said. That's going to be a personal code of honour to protect and avenge the innocent. So we'll go with duty, I would have thought, for that. We then divide up the points amongst the attributes, calculate secondary attributes, work out what skills we're going to do, come up with a talent or a resource, pick out some flaws. In this case, we'll use the physical flaws, that he is hideously scarred, and he's got a poor reputation and personality. So those are all things that will let Simon earn plenty of style points during play. Then we do experience points and finishing touches. So I thought that's a good starter for this. So we'll get going. We'll start with archetype, because that's what you start with. And actually on here you can see we have under the gunslinger, we have an example of a gunslinger is a bounty hunter. So that's what we're going to start with. I have a character sheet, so we're not going to come up with a name yet, but we're going to say he's a gunslinger. And the next thing is to come up with his motivation. As I said, we're going to go with duty for that, because that's what the character's driven by. Next on the thing is to divide 15 points amongst the 6 primary attributes. Now this is quite simple. We have body, dexterity, strength, charisma, intelligence and willpower. We divide 15 points between them. 2 is the average. So if you put 2 points into each of those, you will you'll have 12, and then there's some left over to push them. 5 is, I think, human maximum, certainly at character generation. you have to have at least one in each skill. Now, what I have set up on Google Sheets for myself, because I've done this a few times and I just find it helps me, is I've put together a spreadsheet where I can create things. So again, I'd put in, if I'm in the right screen, I put in gunslinger. His motivation is going to be duty. We'll come back to his flaw in a minute. So we have 15 points to spend. So if I simply go through and put in 2 in each of those, it keeps track up here of how much you've spent. I just like this because it makes it easier for me to work out what I'm doing. So I see this character as being really good with a gun, and gun skills definitely come off dexterity. I think I would probably put a dexterity of 4 in there. Charisma I'm going to drop to a 1. Normally I wouldn't, but given that we've already said that he's hideously scarred and he's bad with people, I think that makes quite a lot of sense. So that leaves me with 2 points left. I kind of get the feeling that he's definitely strong-willed, and the question then is, do I take the extra point and put it into intelligence, or do I put the extra point into strength or body? I think we'll go with body, because I imagine he's used to taking quite a lot of damage. So, like I say, this is something I've put together. I think I've got a link for it because it's on Google Sheets. So I'll put a link to it in case anybody wants to use it. It's not particularly detailed, but what it does do, which I like, is the box turns green if you put in the right number. And if I was to try and give him 3 strength as well, it's not going to stop me, but it is going to warn me that that's more points than I should. That's 16 points, and I should only have 15 points, and it's going to warn me of that. If I put back in the 2, it changes the 2 match. Everybody's happy. So the next thing is secondary attributes. Now, the secondary attributes are calculated in Hollow Earth. Again, what I've done here is just get them to do it automatically. But for anybody that is interested, if you look in the Hollow Earth book itself, under secondary attributes, size will always be 0 if you are a human. Your movement is made up by adding your strength and dexterity. Perception, if I scroll down here slightly, is intelligence and willpower. Initiative, so that's how many dice you roll when initiative comes up, is dexterity plus intelligence. Your defense is split in 2. So you have active defense and passive defense. Your active defense is your dexterity rating, how good you are at getting out of the way, obviously. Your passive defense is your body rating, and your overall defense is those 2 together minus your size. So the idea is that the larger you are, the easier you are to hit. The smaller you are, the more difficult you are to hit. But for human characters, they will always have a size of 0, so you don't have to worry about you just don't have to worry about size. But when you're fighting Tyrannosaurus Rexes, then that kind of changes things quite a lot. Stun is simply your body rating. Health is your body, your willpower, and your size. Again, size will be 0. On the sheet that I've got, it just works those out. You can overwrite it, you can change it, obviously. So the next thing to do is to transfer those primary and secondary attributes across to the character sheet, on which I have done there. And that leads us on to skills. So skills in Ubiquity, you have a skill and it's based off an attribute. So firearms is based off dexterity, and then you have several levels. So if you have the firearms skill, your base will be 4. You would then have however many skill levels you put in it, 2 or 3. If you went for 3, that would give you a rating of 7. So that would mean that any time that you pulled out a gun and shot it, modifiers notwithstanding, you would be rolling 7 dice. The average is then is half of what your rating is. So obviously if it's 6, then your average is going to be 3. If it's 8, your average is going to be 4. If you have an odd numbered rating, then it becomes 3 plus if it's a 7. And what that means is that if you want to take the average, you roll 1 dice, and that will tell you whether you got a 3 or a 4. In play, that really is quite fast. So the question is, what skills do I want to give this guy? I really wish I'd come up with a name for him, but as it's going to be Simon's character, I'm going to let him pick the name. So, a skill name. So, as a bounty hunter, as a gunslinger, I'm fairly confident that the first thing that he's going to need is a decent firearms skill. Now, in the second Hollow Earth Expedition book, Secrets of Surface World, they introduced the idea of 0 level skills, and I like using those. So normally in any Ubiquity game, if you are untrained in a skill, you are at a -2 dice to whatever your attribute is. So if you've got an attribute of 2 and you're untrained in the skill, so you are untrained in firearms and your dexterity is 2, then you have a 0 dice chance to hit. If there are not modifiers, you're not going to do it unless you use style points or something else. So a 0 level skill, you get some as standard when you start the game. These simply take away that penalty. So in a cowboy game, certainly firearms is going to be a 0 level skill, and that will mean that you, if you had a dexterity of 2 and no firearms skill and you went for your gun, you'd get 2 dice. It's not good, but it's better than it could be. I've got a list of 0 level skills here, so I'm going to put those in. I probably should have done it before I started putting in firearms. So for frontier folk, and I think this guy will count as a frontier folk guy, he gets athletics, he gets brawl, he gets firearms, he gets guts, and he gets ride. So these are all 0 level skills. So the attributes, firearms is based on dexterity, athletics is based on strength, I believe. There we go. So when I go back to the athletics on the actual Hex book, then it is based off strength. That's obviously a typo in the Old West one, but as it's a free download, and I'll put a link to it down below, yeah, I can't really complain too much about that. So yeah, so athletics is based on strength, brawl is also based on strength, guts is based on willpower, and ride, it's a good question, don't often use ride, is also based on dexterity. So all good things. And over here you can see we've got the attribute level, we've got the overall rating, we've got what the average is. So the question then is, what do I want to put in there? Now I think firearms, the man's going to be good with a gun, so we'll put in something fairly hefty. We'll put in a 3 to start with, and I might even raise that later. Athletics, because it is a 0 level skill, up here it's only taken 2.5 for it. You get the first point of changing a 0 level skill to a rank 1 at half, and my little sheet just keeps track of that for me. Likewise, I think the guy's going to be pretty good on a horse. We'll give him a ride of 3. So what other things would it be a good idea for him to have? Obviously things like diplomacy are not his strong point. I may give him fast draw, which is not a 0 level skill, but I'll give him 2 in that. I may give him a specialisation at some point, but I don't know that my little sheet actually deals with specialisations. I think given his job, he's going to be good at investigation. So fast draw is based off dexterity, investigation is based off intelligence. And we'll give him, probably give him a 3 in investigation. So I think both stealth and survival would be skills that he would have. And I think probably we'll go with lingo, which is a language skill. And again, I know I've now spent all of those points, so those are there. So the next thing is to transfer this information across to his character sheet, and I'll get that done. So I've been transferring those across, but I thought, well, you don't want to watch me typing in loads and loads of numbers. The average is worth just looking at, because I know this is sometimes something that slightly confuses people. So with a rating of 2, obviously his average in athletics is going to be a 1. With a rating of 2, it's going to be a 1. His fast draw is going to be a 3. So with firearms, he's got a dexterity of 4, which gives him a base of 4. We've put 3 levels in that, which gives him a rating of 7. So half of 7 would be 3.5. So we put that in as 3+. So if at some point he wants to take the average, then he can take a 3 straight away, or if that's not quite good enough and he wants to push it and see whether or not he can do it, he rolls a single dice, and if he gets it, he gets a 4. Just speeds things up in play. Likewise, his guts will be a 1+, his investigation will be 2+, and go 1+, and then stealth and survival are whole numbers. So if you do watch one of the games, then hopefully this will make more sense when you hear people talking about taking the average. So that is getting the skills down. So the next thing is talents and resources. For talents, the Old West has some slightly different talents. They're generally just say, go and look at the appropriate page in Hex, and that will tell you where it is. There's a whole lot down here. Cavalryman, if you want to be somebody that fights from horseback regularly. Cold-blooded, animal affinity, there's a whole stack. The one I'm going to go for is danger sense. So this is in Hollow Earth Expedition, and basically it means that if you are surprised, you keep your full defense rating. You may even get an empathy roll to see if you get an unbidden premonition or bad feeling about the situation. So that sounds to me quite useful. Now, I'll get onto this in a minute, but there's a second little bit at the end for experience, and when I get to that, I think I'm likely to take another talent. And the talent that I'm seeing that interests me for this character is hip shooter. So if you've got firearms of 4, which he has, it means that when he fast draws his weapon, he can ignore a -2 penalty for that. And I think he also gets I need to read that to find out whether or not that's just the first time you take it or after that, but you get your fanning penalty is -2 as well. So if you want to stand there and fan the gun, you don't lose dice for that. So in this case then, we're going to go for, under talents, we are going to go for danger sense, and retain active defense when surprised. And we'll come back to the other thing in a minute. So as standard, you can take a talent in character generation for nothing, or you can take resources. So resources would mean that you'd got an ally, you were employed, you had contacts, patrons, you were wealthy, Indian adopted, I quite like. I think we might use that for one of the other pre-gens. So those are kind of, you could go for talents or you can go for resources, and by spending experience points you can likewise purchase extra talents or extra resources. Now at this point we'll go and have a look at flaws. Now flaws are one of the things that I really like about Ubiquity. I like the fact that there is something there mechanical which is going to encourage your players to take a suboptimal decision. When they do that, they get style point, which they can then use to buy extra dice or to avoid taking damage, those kinds of things in game. So it gives them something for making a decision that otherwise they may not want to make. And it just keeps the game flowing. It's a lot more fun with flaws. Now, we'd already said we were going to give him a scar. As I say, in the Old West book, below resources, we've got a whole stack of flaws. So you could have some kind of terrible disease. You could be arrogant. You could be broke. You never ever hang on to money. I know that feeling. All of these things, but in and on this list there is Scar, and at that point all it says is see disfigured in Hex. So page 78, it probably won't be page 78 because of the way this thing works out. So again, in the original Hex book there's a big long list of different scars there, different flaws there, and if we go down them, we should be able to find one that is a physical. It should be here somewhere. No, it's a social flaw disfigured. So mental flaw, social flaws disfigured. So your character has a nasty scar, birthmark or deformity that repulses other people. You suffer a -2 on all rolls where your character's appearance is a factor. And you earn style point when he is rejected because of his appearance. So we are going to go for Scar, -2, all rolls involving appearance, -2. So that gets us through flaws. You can take more than one flaw. I quite often do. I like to... I mean, on a mechanical level, it's a nice way of boosting yourself during the game that you've got these flaws, and if you play up to them at the right way, at the right times, then not only does it make the game more interesting, but it gives you some bonuses. I also find that if I've got a character that's got enough flaws, then it helps me to get into that person's mindset much faster. But for Simon, I'll have a chat with him later and say, look, I've given you a scar, is there any other flaw you want? You can always do that. So the next thing is experience points, and playing with experience points is a bit different. You have 15 experience points and you can spend them on skills on a one-to-one basis, and that's not though like character generation. So if I wanted to up his firearms to a 4, that would cost me, I think that would cost me 8 experience points. Yeah, a skill is the new skill level times 2 points. You can get a skill specialization for 3 points, which means that you pick a sub-skill. So with firearms, I could say, okay, he'll get an extra point using a pistol. So I'd say pistols would go to a 4, so he'd have 8, so he'd have an average of 4 with that. But if you were adding the new level to go up to that, it's twice that. So you can also boost your primary attributes, but obviously 5 times the new attribute level, that makes that quite expensive. So if I wanted to pull his charisma up, that's not too bad, but that's still 10 points. If I want to put his willpower up to a 4, that's going to be 20 points, which is more than you get. So as a standard during character generation, you go through the basic character generation, and then you give them 15 points to do that. Now, going back to the Hollow Earth rules, what you can do is, for 15 points, you can buy a talent or a resource. And this is where, as I said earlier, alongside Danger Sense, I'm also going to pick Hip Shooter. And that ignores penalty for fast draw. And that's basically the end of character generation. Beyond, there's some finishing touches in there that you need. That's the main body of it done. So finishing touches, obviously we need to give him a name, we need to think about how he looks, and then we need to buy some equipment. And I'm thinking, for this character, you start with $100, and in the back of the Old West book there is a lot of potential. There's lots of weapons, and there's write-ups for all of those weapons. And when you start to get down below that, you've then got other handheld weapons, vehicles, various other different supplies. There's a whole lot in here to choose from, you know, what you'd expect. And I quite like the fact that there's a little thing on bounties. So how much would you earn for tracking down a bank robber, or a stagecoach robber, or a train robber? I like that idea. That's quite useful as a GM to have that. You know, if you want to have a Mustang that's going to cost you $60, that's a chunkier initial 100. I'm not going to go through all of these now, but what I will do is, he definitely wants a Colt Peacemaker. I can't think of any weapon that he's going to be more likely to want. So you have your damage. I'll get onto that in a minute. We have the strength, we have the capacity. Obviously, Peacemaker's going to be a revolver. It's going to take 6 rounds. We have ranges, which you get negative dice for moving further and further away. It's got a fast rate of fire. It weighs 3 pounds, and it costs $14. My thought at the moment is whether or not this guy is going to be carrying only 1 gun, or whether he's going to be carrying 2. I think we might go for 2, but we'll see how that works. So in the character sheet, we want a Colt Peacemaker. Oh, right, okay, let's just put Peacemaker in there, because on this sheet it's not going to let me do it. The damage was 3L. Now, without going into too much detail, you have non-lethal damage and lethal damage in any Ubiquity game, and in this case, obviously being shot, that's going to be lethal damage. So we have a 3 lethal damage. The modifier is going to be his firearms rating, so that's going to be 7. Now, what you then do is add those together. So his attack is going to be 10L, and his average is going to be 5L. So in combat, without any modifiers, you'll be rolling 10 dice to see whether or not, see how much damage you do. In Ubiquity, you roll your attack. The defender rolls their defense. So in the case of this character, the defense would be 7. So he's rolling 7 dice against 10 dice. You take one away from the other, and whatever is left is the amount of damage you take. So you roll once, and that is your to hit roll and your damage roll. So the ranges on this, I've got the book next to me, so I can do it without having to keep flicking backwards and forwards, is 20 for close range. If he's between 20 and 40 feet, he'll get a -2. If he's between 40 and 80 feet, he'll get -4 dice. And if he's 81 plus, he will get -8 dice. The capacity was 6, and I normally put in an R next to that to show it's a revolver. It's not internal. the rate of fire. Rate of fire is a fast. I'm not sure what the speed is. I will have to go and check that up. And the weight of a Colt Peacemaker is £3. Ammunition, I will need to dig into the book and work that kind of stuff out. But honestly, I don't think most of you are going to be very interested in me spending $3.25 per 50 rounds of .45 caliber information and trying to work all that stuff out. But hopefully that gives you a rough idea of how you would do character generation in a Ubiquity game. So, as I say, we'd have a name for him, but we know he's a gunslinger, we know he's a bounty hunter, we know he's motivated by duty, so when he plays into that, especially when it causes him trouble, that will be a bonus to him. We know what his primary attributes are, and from those we derive secondary attributes. We know how we generate skills, and what weapon he's got, how we put that in there. He's got 2 talents, danger sense and hip shooter, and he's got a scar which will make his life difficult when he's trying to deal with other people. And then the second page, again, there's a space for his name. He's still a gunslinger. His motivation is still duty. We know that he's got a Colt Peacemaker. So there's space for that. Encumbrance, I'm not going to dig into now, but there are rules, and it's based off your strength, how much you can carry. I'm going to let Simon decide what age he is. I'm pretty sure he said he wanted him to be male, but height, weight, hair, clothing, all of that kind of stuff, background, languages, I'm going to let him do. Because he took lingo, I think he does get an additional language. So again, I'll check with Simon and find out what he wants for that. I say, Hollow Earth Expedition, I've always said is one of my favourite games, Ubiquity games I really enjoy. I will put notes into the Old West supplement for Hollow Earth Expedition. You need Hollow Earth Expedition to play it, but it's a really nice supplement. I'm gobsmacked that the guy didn't contact Exile Games and get it published, because I think it's absolutely beautiful. So yeah, that's character generation for Ubiquity. Hopefully you'll find that useful or interesting or not too tedious anyway. Yeah, I will be playing a couple of sessions of this, I imagine, in the next few weeks, and as ever we'll put it up there. We're going to go back to Conan, but I need to get the sandbox that I'm building for that planned out first. Definitely let me know if you try Ubiquity at all, if you find that you really like the Old West, and I'll put a link in the notes below to the Old West, but also to the character generation sheet I've got in Google Sheets in case anybody wants to use that. Okay, have fun, bye.